Shakti, Om. Om Shakti, Om Shakti, Om 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 Shakti, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti. I think you probably know this is the first part of a two-part workshop. Next Thursday, 1 week from today, we'll continue with part 2. Today's session will be more focused on reviewing the basic practice of pranayama, a number of different breathing practices, understanding the benefits and why we should practice, and how to develop a personal practice in a very safe way that can gradually lead to a very powerful form of practice with benefits on the physical, pranic level, and mental level. I know some of you here are quite experienced. I think I mentioned before, you're welcome to contribute if you have something to add. My intention is to speak about pranayama a little bit and then practice, and then speak about it some more, and then practice, and kind of go back and forth like that. And maybe a good way to start is simply to talk about what is pranayama. The word can be divided into two, prana and yama or ayama. Prana meaning the primordial unit of energy, the life force, the very thing that keeps us alive. So on a more subtle level than the physical level, it's the very thing that is behind anything that has movement, behind rocket energy, behind the breath, behind even mental thinking. Nothing can move without prana. We ourselves cannot be alive without prana. We can survive maybe a month without food, maybe a few minutes without air, without oxygen, but not even for a second without prana. So prana is the very essential element of life. And the yogis understood this, taught about this, and learned to work with this pranic level of being as a way of cultivating mastery over the mind and experiencing the ultimate reality, the spiritual presence that lies beneath the surface of our beings, this ground of being that we share, the spiritual consciousness that we share. They pursued that practice through the various levels of being, from the physical level to the more subtle pranic level, to the mental level, to awaken to the spiritual level. That's a little bit about prana. Ayama means a few different things. It can be considered to mean expansion, lengthening, or controlling, regulating. And in a way, they kind of go together. It's the purposeful expansion and regulation of the breath. And it's that regulation of the breath brings a certain mastery over the mind. And we'll speak more about that. When prana is recognized, personified, revered as a deity, it's called Shakti, the divine's feminine energy. So that's why I decided to entitle the workshop Awakening Shakti, for us to become more awake to the presence of that Shakti that's within us and to develop it, allow it to awaken us by becoming more attuned to that level of our being. Maybe without speaking about it a lot more, well, maybe I'll talk for a few minutes about physical benefits. Then we'll also talk about benefits on more subtle levels of being. But on the physical level, we know that oxygen is essential for our metabolism. that every cell in the body relies on oxygen as a way to function, as a way to produce energy. And through the circulatory system, the release of waste products called carbon dioxide. So we rely on the breath as a form of keeping us alive and allowing our cells to function in a healthy way. So pranayama oxygenates the blood by speeding up the respiratory process and by enabling us to take in much more than the normal amount of air. When actually measured, it's said that a really complete, thorough inhalation can bring in as much as 7 times than the normal shallow inhalation. So it has that capacity to increase our ability to bring in oxygen by 7 times. We also know that the breath is normally involuntary. In our day-to-day lives, we don't tend to think about breathing. We don't tell ourselves, okay, it's now it's time to take another breath. It happens on its own. It's part of the involuntary or autonomic nervous system function. But it's the one part of the autonomic nervous system, involuntary system, that can easily be made voluntary. So it gives us a doorway into the functions within us that are normally involuntary, such as the functioning of the digestive system, even the functioning of the heart. Through the practice of breathing, we exert control over the motion of the lungs. Through exertion of control over the motion of the lungs, we begin to regulate the vagus nerve, one of the primary sympathetic nerves. And through the regulation of the sympathetic nervous system, we influence and regulate the heartbeat, the digestion, the function of the immune system to some degree. So through this doorway of what's normally involuntary, made voluntary, we have this very strong influence over the whole system. In particular, the ability to relax, to calm the nervous system. By deep breathing, we send a message to the whole rest of the body that it's okay to calm down and slow down. You could say that deep breathing is the easiest, simplest, most portable method of stress management. So you can interrupt the stress response easily and create an alternate mode of operating called relaxation response simply by slow, deep breathing. So on physical level, it has tremendous benefits. It helps us be alert, awake, alive, and energized. That said, let's do a little bit of pranayama, and we'll do some pranayama with the intention of exploring how to deepen the breath in a way that's very comfortable. And the practice that we use most often for this is we call dirga swasam, the slow, deep breathing practice. And we do this typically in 3 parts. And that inspires me to say just a little bit about the physiology of breathing. Probably everyone knows that the diaphragm muscle is a dome-shaped muscle that sits at the base of the rib cage. And that muscle, when we inhale, that muscle contracts and draws downward. And that downward movement of the diaphragm muscle creates a vacuum in the lungs and draws air in, ideally through the nose, because the nose has the capacity to filter the air that comes in and to help control the temperature of the air that comes in. So it helps us breathe in air in a way that's healthier, that sorts out anything that's inappropriate for us to take into the lungs. And it helps control the temperature. So with the diaphragm muscle pulling down, the abdominal organs get displaced a little bit. It causes the abdomen to puff out a little. Of course, the air itself is not coming into the abdomen. The air is coming into the lungs, but by the diaphragm muscle pressing down, it pushes the abdominal area out a little bit, causing a little movement out. As we continue to inhale and the lungs expand into the rib cage area where we're familiar with, we can feel that expansion happen both on the front of the ribs, the side of the ribs, and even the back of the ribs. The lungs expand in all those directions. And if we inhale thoroughly, the air can move all the way up into the upper lungs so that it even feels like we're breathing up near the collarbones, the apex of the lungs. So when we teach this Dirgha Swasam breathing, we often describe it as having three parts: a lower part, a middle part, and the upper part. In actuality, the breath doesn't first go only into the lower lungs, right? It comes through the trachea and divides into two places and going into each lung fairly equally. But that idea of three parts can be a way of helping us gain some control and visualize the movement of the diaphragm muscle and the movement of the air into the lungs. And for that reason, it's useful to be aware of our posture. So even before we start practicing Dirgha Swasam, deep breathing, it's useful to have a little attention to the posture. And for that purpose, I'll describe that for most people, we need to have some height, some lift under the hips. And that lift under the hips allows the knees to come a little more forward. In fact, maybe I'll lower my camera a little more so you can see this way, then I might move it back. That if the knees are up, it's very hard to sit up tall and to have the spine support our upright posture fully. So with some lift under the hips, for most people, that can help you lower the knees so that they're more even with the hips, or even lower than the hips if possible. This support under the hips also helps create a little forward shift in the pelvis. If I'm sitting this way, my back tends to be rounded, and the lower back tends to be rounded. In actuality, the natural curve of the spine in the lower back should be an inward curve. So if I tilt my pelvis forward slightly, then I get that natural inward curve in the low back area. And then I'm really using the spine itself as the core of support. I'm using the skeleton to support my upright posture instead of the musculature. And that enables the body to be more relaxed. And using that, the natural curve of the spine enables me to sit up tall with the least amount of effort. All right, let's practice a little bit. So experiment with your seated posture. If you're not already familiar with a posture that works really well for you, get a little support under the hips or sit in a chair. All right? There's no shame in yoga sitting in a chair if that's what helps you be comfortable and steady. Ideally, if we have this lift under the hips and that little inward curve in the low back, that enables us to sit up really tall. With that skeletal support, it should enable us to release the shoulders downward so the shoulders can be really relaxed. It's very common to hold tension in the shoulders unintentionally. So see if you can consciously soften the shoulders and release them downward. And typically in yoga, we have the hands relaxed on the thighs or in the lap. And if you like, you can place the hands in some kind of mudra, like the index finger and the thumbs together, with the palms down or with the palms up, or even one set of fingers on top of the other and the thumbs touching. It's another kind of mudra that can sit gently in the lap with the arms relaxed. So you can experiment with a mudra if you like. In addition, we want to feel an openness in the upper chest. So we want to avoid having the shoulders rounded forward or pinched too far back. If you find just the right place for the shoulders, there can be a nice openness in the upper chest and a lengthy feeling in the neck. Even we can give a little attention to relaxing the jaw and the cheeks. And if you're new to practicing this deep breathing, you could experiment with placing a hand on the abdomen. That might help you. Because we'll begin this three-part breathing by inhaling first in a way where we feel the abdomen puffing out, and then exhale, pressing the abdomen inward to have a complete exhalation. So start by just thinking of breathing in a way that expands the abdomen, and then pressing the abdomen inward to have a thorough exhale. When you press the abdomen inward, you can exhale more thoroughly. And then on your next inhalation, continue to expand and feel the breath move into the rib cage. And you could even place your fingers and thumb around the sides of the ribs to feel the ribs expanding. When you exhale, you can relax the rib cage and again pull in the abdomen to have a thorough exhale. As you inhale, feel the abdomen expand, the rib cage expand, and then let the inhale move all the way into the upper chest. Then simply relax the upper chest, relax the rib cage. Go at your own pace and complete each exhale by gently pressing in the abdomen to make it thorough. So try a few slow, steady, wave-like breaths, expanding the lungs fully. Go at your own pace, and then emptying the lungs thoroughly. So the breath becomes one wave-like motion, completely relaxed, and breathing always through the nose, assuming that there's no obstacle there. Continue for another moment at your own pace. Ooh. And relax the breath. And hopefully everyone can feel a nice calming energy from the deep breathing. We always want to practice in a way that comfortable and free of tension. So we never want to try to force the air to be too deep or too long in a way that would create any discomfort. We will also talk about in the practice within integral yoga that when we can regulate the deep breathing, we often work towards developing an exhalation that's twice as long as the inhale. For a few different reasons, it helps us regulate more fully, begin to control the movement of the breath. It's also in harmony with the tendency of the heartbeat to work 1 second and rest 2 seconds. Right? So it's actually very, very harmonious for our system and ultimately really helps calm the nervous system in a very powerful way. We talked a little bit about benefits on the physical level. On the level of another level of our being that from the yogic point of view is a little more subtle, the pranic level or the subtle energy body. This is the level in which we talk about chakras, the flow of prana through the system. Pranayama is known to help remove the blockages, the kind of subtle forms of blockage that inhibit the flow of prana. So we know the breath flows through the respiratory system, the blood flows through the veins and the arteries. The prana flows through something called nadis, subtle energy channels. This is the same thing that's understood and practiced when you hear of acupuncture, right? And qi. That qi or prana is the same element. And the use of acupressure or acupuncture are ways of working with that subtle energy body. Pranayama is another way of working with it, using the breath itself as a kind of physical counterpart to the pranic system that helps remove those blockages. Just like you hear of plaque in an artery, you could say that there's a kind of toxin or, I can't think of the word that I was looking for, but an obstacle that inhibits the flow of prana through these nadis. So when we do this kind of slow, deep breathing, we increase the amount of oxygen, but we also eliminate that which inhibits the flow of prana. And we bring more prana to our whole system. Our system is wired to be full of prana, but through unhealthy lifestyle habits, poor diet, poor air, we may inhibit the flow of prana in our system. When we increase the flow of prana, we build up our subtle energy system. You can, if you like, you can research a word called ojas, which is conserved pranic energy, gives us a kind of bank account of prana. And we would experience that in the form of things like stamina, resilience, immunity. We build up our system with this subtle energy. Sometimes you meet someone and they're just full of energy. Children are often that way. They don't have mental problems bogging them down. They don't have the mind consumed with selfishness that can inhibit the flow of prana. So sometimes you meet these people that are just full of this vitality, and they have tremendous energy to do things. With this kind of stamina and bank account of prana, we can extend ourselves when we need to. Right? We can go beyond our normal limits safely because we have sort of subtle energy in the bank. And when that prana gets conserved and that ojas conserved, it develops more and more refined levels of energy to the point where you've often seen the saints depicted with a halo around the head because they're vibrating with so much radiance, right? Their pranic level is radiating out beyond the physical body. And this buildup of prana also enables us to focus the mind even more fully. This helps us develop more and more clarity, sharpness, and focus in the mind in order to function in any way, in order to use the mind to do anything with that mental acuity, with that mental energy. So there's these subtle energetic benefits to consider as well. And that ability to remove the obstacles to the flow of prana is especially experienced through the practice of Kapalabhati, which we can work with next. Some of you I know are very familiar with this. Kapalabhati is also translated as skull shining breath because of the way that it encourages prana or subtle energy upward, up into the head, into the upper areas. So when we practice, you sometimes might feel some energy moving up into the head. But it's done, it could also be called rapid abdominal breathing because it's done simply by snapping the abdomen in on the exhale, followed by a relaxed inhale. And it's a series of exhalations like this, snapping it in each time rapidly, as if you're trying to blow some dust out of the nose. I can practice a little bit so you can hear and even see my hand on my abdomen. It would be like this, and I'm exaggerating the sounds so that you'll hear it. Could you hear that? Yeah, I'm exaggerating a little bit. It doesn't need to be that forceful. But it's a snapping in, creating an exhalation, followed by a relaxed inhale. And these exhalations are done in a series. And that series of exhalations ends with a final exhale, a deep inhale, like in the three-part breathing, filling the lungs all the way up, and then a slow, slow, steady exhalation. And because the rapid breathing has oxygenated the blood and brought in a lot of oxygen rapidly, that exhalation at the end can be very, very slow. Maybe even a few slow exhalations. And that completes one round of this breathing practice called Kapalabhati. Those who are new to it can start slowly, getting a feel for moving just the abdomen. Sometimes people unintentionally move the shoulders or the upper chest. Sometimes it's a little hard to get a feeling for isolating the muscles in the abdomen to create that breath. If you place your hand there, that might be helpful if you're new to it. So let's try a few rounds of this Kapalabhati breathing. If you're new, I encourage you to go slowly. Some of you are very experienced and you may go more rapidly because you have a easeful control over it. But keep in mind that we want the exhalation to be rapid or a little dynamic. And with an inhalation after each exhalation, I'll purposely go at a slow rhythm and I'll exaggerate the sound so you can hear my rhythm. And you can practice along with me if you're newer, or you can go more rapidly if you like. You can close your eyes so your focus can be more on the breathing. You can have your hand on the abdomen if that's helpful. Check your posture to see that you're sitting up tall, shoulders relaxed. And I'll begin the first round. Exhale fully. Have an inhale, slowly, deeply filling the lungs all the way. And then have a long, slow exhalation. Complete the slow exhalation by gently pressing in the abdomen. And then relax the breath. If in doing this breathing practice you ever feel lightheaded or dizzy, that would be a sign that you need to slow down or stop the rapid breathing altogether. We never want to create that effect. But generally, if we go at a steady pace, and if we don't hold the breath at any point, we should avoid that. Let's try another round. I'll go at a slow pace, but again, go at whatever pace you're comfortable with. It's ideal to keep a steady rhythm. So find a rhythm that works well for you. Exhale fully. Inhale slowly, deeply, filling the lungs. Now long, relaxed exhale. Let it take as long as it will. And then relax the breath. And if you're very comfortable with it, you could go a little more rapidly. And I'll extend the length of this round a little more exhalations in this round. But if you start to feel like you've had enough, if the abdominal muscles become tired, you can stop at any point on your own. We'll go a little bit longer this time. Again, exhale fully. Have a slow, deep inhalation. Fill the lungs all the way to capacity. Let the exhale take as long as it will. And relax the breath. We'll do one more round. But if that feels enough, especially if there's any ill effect, any discomfort, you can just relax the breath. On this fourth round, we'll go yet a little bit longer. Stop at any time on your own. And if you like, you can have some awareness in the center of the head where you may feel energy moving or awakening. Also strive to create your own steady rhythm. Dynamic, yet relaxed. Go ahead and begin. Exhale fully. And exhale slowly. Pause for just 30 seconds just to feel the effect. Eyes closed. Relax the shoulders, the jaw, the eyes. And see if you can discern the effect within you. Ooh. And if you want to stretch out your legs, change your seated position, you're welcome to do that. You can see that one of the benefits of the rapid breathing is it really energizes the mind. Right? It really brings alertness. And for that reason, it's a great form of preparation, especially for morning meditation, to make the mind really alert, yet relaxed. Probably the best condition for the mind to function in an optimal way is when it is both alert and relaxed. Some people only know alertness when they're caffeinated, and they only know relaxed when they're sleepy. But if you have that combination, the mind can function in an optimal way. And for sure, that condition to be both alert and relaxed is the ideal condition for meditation. So one of the benefits on the mental level of pranayama is a perfect preparation for meditation. I can even describe how in the tradition of yoga, we understand this connection between the body, the pranic level, and the mental level. This pranic level connects or acts as a bridge between the physical and mental levels. An example of that, whenever the mind is really focused on one thing like painting, like reading, playing chess, really zeroed in, the mind is really calm and focused, the breath will also become calm and focused. When the mind is excited, afraid, in some way really activated, the breath will also express that same condition. The breath will be rapid. So you can see there's a connection between the two. The breath will follow suit. But it's also true in the reverse order. If we consciously slow down the breath, control the breath, it exerts a strong influence over the mind. It helps the mind also become calm. So the pranayama, through the nervous system, through the pranic system, helps calm the mind. It helps remove both an overly energized mind that we call rajas, or a mind that has too much inertia, a mind that's too stagnant. It helps eliminate those extremes and bring the mind into a balanced condition that we call sattva. And it's that sattvic condition that's conducive for the practice of meditation. And really for the practice of using the mind to do anything that requires focused attention. So pranayama is not only for the purpose of meditation, but it certainly helps in that regard. Now, at the end of Kapalabhati, when you're very experienced, you can begin to practice this retention done by lowering the chin to the chest. And along with Mula Bandha, it means that the pranic energy that would normally flow downward, is being directed upward. And the prana that would normally flow upward is being directed downward. And it has a magnifying effect on the cleansing, on the removal of obstacles, to allow prana to flow more fully. And it kind of pressurizes the prana to expand throughout the whole pranic system. I wouldn't say that you need to direct your attention to that. It's just helpful to know that that's what's happening. So I think it's useful to know that and to intentionally practice those bandhas together for that purpose of creating that dynamic activation of prana. But I don't think it's necessary to put your awareness there. I think it's interesting to put your awareness wherever it feels like it naturally goes, and generally to the heart chakra or to the ajna chakra in the head. So I think that's where we put attention. But it's useful to know that that's what's happening and to intentionally create that dynamic. Maybe I'll say one more thing about the benefit and the use of the mind along with pranayama. There's something called pranic visualization that can be done for healing. Prana will follow the mind through visualizing some part of the body. You can direct subtle energy to that part of the body. So you can visualize a flow of white light or a flow of energy going specifically to some place in the body that needs healing, and feel that you direct prana to that place. And you could envision light going to that place on the inhale and darkness flowing out of that place on the exhale. Or you could envision light or prana flowing into that area on the inhale and radiating and healing that area on the exhale. But that's called pranic visualization. And it's done simply by consciously feeling as you inhale and exhale that you're directing subtle energy, healing energy to some particular place in the body. Many people have found tremendous benefit from doing that practice. The yoga masters understood that in a way, the body is crystallized mind. As you think, so you become. So when the mind is filled with the idea, the image of healing, of relaxing, of calming, of bringing peace, and you mentally focus that kind of energy along with visualizing it in a certain part of the body, you create this dynamic healing experience. So it's something worth being aware of. And that kind of pranic visualization can be done along with this third practice that we'll look at now, that's called Nadi Suddhi. Nadi Suddhi means nerve purification, or the practice that most thoroughly cleanses or removes the obstacles to the flow of prana through the nadis, through those subtle energy channels. They're called nadis. Nadi Suddhi, nerve purification. And this is very similar to the deep breathing that we learned already, only it's done through alternate nostrils. We start by exhaling through one nostril, and then inhale through that same nostril, and then switch nostrils. So it's a pattern of exhale, inhale, then switch nostrils. And that exhaling, that control over the nostrils is done by simply creating a gentle fist with one of the hands. Typically, we use the right hand, but you could use the left. Extend the thumb and the last two fingers. This is actually a mudra called Vishnu mudra. And if I bring my upper arm right up next to my chest, instead of holding the elbow out, then I can bring the thumb and ring finger right up alongside the nostrils, right? And I can rest them there. And then I can exhale by closing off the right nostril, inhale through the right nostril, inhale through the, close off the right nostril to exhale through the left, inhale through the left, close it off and exhale through the right, and so forth to continue. So I'll guide us in that practice, but I just encourage you to stretch out your legs or change your seated position if you need to, and then we'll sit for about 5 minutes or a little more than 5 minutes doing this practice. But I'm going to introduce one other variation on the practice that's called Ujjayi breathing. And Ujjayi breathing is done by contracting the glottis at the base of the throat to narrow the passageway through which the air flows. When you want to fog a mirror with your breath, we do something like this. And that fogging the mirror with your breath is done by unconsciously narrowing that passageway. If you want to whisper, if you're whispering, you also unconsciously are narrowing that passageway, but with the mouth open. The practice of Ujjayi breathing is narrowing that passageway with the mouth closed. So it creates a little friction because of that narrow passageway, and it slows down the flow of air since the passageway is narrowed. It gives you a more refined control over the volume of air as you inhale and exhale. So you can experiment with that for a few minutes, or even for just 1 minute. Just relax, sit up tall, take a few deep breaths, and experiment with narrowing that passageway at the base of the throat. I'll exaggerate the sound so you can hear it, something like what Darth Vader sounds like. So you don't need to purposely make it loud. It can be subtle, but you can feel a little friction there, and it creates a subtle sound. And you can practice that narrowed passageway in a way that feels comfortable, not too forceful, not too narrow, right? Not too tight, but gently narrowing that passageway. Try a few more breaths that way and see if you can find a place that feels comfortable. And relax the breath. So what we'll do now for another practice session, we'll do some slow, deep breathing through both nostrils and experiment with using this Ujjayi breathing or narrowed passageway But make sure that you're breathing rapidly enough that you don't run out of air. Right? But you can feel that you're controlling the volume of air so it's an even flow of air as you inhale and as you exhale. And after a minute of doing deep breathing through both nostrils, then we'll begin to alternate the nostrils. Okay? So sit comfortably. You can close your eyes. As you're ready to, start by exhaling, pressing in the abdomen to make a thorough exhale. And then begin your deep breathing, expanding the abdomen, the rib cage, letting the inhale move all the way into the upper chest. Then relaxing the upper chest, the rib cage, and ending each exhale by gently pressing in the abdomen. Go at your own pace, slow, wave-like, deepened breaths. Breathe in a way that feels very relaxed. And see if it's comfortable to include Ujjayi breathing. If the narrowing of that passageway is comfortable, continue. If it's uncomfortable, you can let go of it. But let's begin to alternate the nostrils by making a gentle fist, extending the thumb and the last two fingers. Close off the right nostril, exhaling through the left. As you're ready to, inhale through the left. When you're ready, close it off and exhale through the right. Go at your own pace. And if you can comfortably do so, keep doing these deep, lengthened breaths through one nostril and then through the other. Continue to sit up tall so the lungs can fully expand. If you're comfortable with this breathing, feeling no tension, you can also begin to count the length of the inhale and exhale. Om 1, Om 2, Om 3, and find a count, a rhythm that comfortably matches your breathing. And you might be able to keep a steady rhythm. Another way of measuring the length of the breath is by repeating a mantra. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, so many times on the inhale and exhale to find a steady rhythm. With your next exhalation through the right nostril, you can finish your practice. Relax the breath. You can just sit briefly in silence, observing the effect. Om. And open your eyes. Adjust your seated posture if you like. We have a few minutes left. I want to first, so I don't forget, encourage you between now and next Thursday, even if someone's listening to this recording tomorrow, to practice regularly If you practice regularly over this next week, you'll be better prepared to make good use of what I share next week. As I'll teach about how to develop the practice even further. And you can do this simply by gradually paying more and more attention. The more carefully you completely inhale and exhale, you more thoroughly exhale. The more thoroughly you exhale, the more space you make for a deeper inhalation. When the breath becomes deeper, you have magnified the benefits. When you practice Kapalabhati, you can go at a rhythm that feels comfortable and steady, but you could gradually, just very gradually, increase the number of exhalations per round. All right? I would recommend, if you can, make time in your schedule to practice at least 12 minutes of pranayama every day. If you could do that twice a day, even better, but at least once a day, 12 minutes. You could practice a few minutes of Dirgha Swasam, the deep breathing, to kind of warm up. You could practice 2 or 3 rounds of Kapalabhati. 3 is ideal, going at your own pace. And then 4 or 5 minutes of alternate nostril breathing. And by that time, you should be able to create a condition that feels both very relaxed, yet very energized. And if you have a meditation practice, it will be interesting to see if you can use those pranayama practices as an entryway into your meditation. Right? It should serve as a good preparation. But if you practice regularly over this next week in a way that remains comfortable, don't strain, don't try to do too much all at once, then you'll make better use of next week's session. In particular, with alternate nostril breathing, if you can develop the ability to establish a steady rhythm by counting or repeating a mantra, you can experiment with gradually making the exhalation a little longer. And that's possible. I mean, you might be able to make the inhale longer also, but let the inhale remain as it is, and just see if you can gradually make the exhale longer. And eventually, you could make the exhale as much as twice as long as the inhale, and use that ratio. But don't worry about getting there right away. It's not necessary, but it's something that you could think about and at least work towards. You could at least have a 1-to-1 ratio to start with, and then try lengthening the exhale a little more. A couple things to share. Of course, it's ideal that we practice pranayama on an empty stomach. It doesn't have to be completely empty, but it doesn't make sense to practice pranayama right after eating, or even in the hour after eating. Right? Ideally, you have a few hours after eating to practice pranayama. If you know that your mind is already hyper alert, then practice less Kapalabhati and more slow, deep breathing. Right? If you are feeling sluggish or a little sleepy, like in the morning, then give more emphasis to the rapid breathing, right? To really awaken the mind. Even when I feel like I may not have gotten enough sleep, I'm a little tired in the morning, if I practice some dynamic Kapalabhati practice, it gets me wide awake. I don't need a cup of coffee. Right? Bring that hyper, that real alert focus to the mind. At the same time that it's alert, it need not be hyper alert, right? It can be a balanced alertness, right? A calm alertness. And of course, if you're going to bother to practice pranayama, I would encourage you to also practice meditation along with it. They go so well together. The Yoga Sutras, one of the original scriptures that describes the teachings of yoga, it describes the benefit of pranayama as a way to remove the veil over the inner light. Right? The spiritual presence within us is sometimes spoken of as a spiritual light or an inner light. And pranayama is said to remove the veil that covers that inner light, meaning that it enables us to awaken from this identification with only the body mind and to experience this spiritual presence that is there at the heart of our being, all of us. So it has this tremendous potential, and its regular practice can help gradually, especially if it's practiced gradually over time, not too rapidly, can help us very safely build up a tremendous amount of prana. Let's do a little more deep breathing and just sit in silence for a few minutes. I was hoping that we would have time to meditate. It won't be a long meditation. Stretch out your legs if you need to, but then come back to your seated position. Find the natural curves of the spine. Feel that you can sit up tall. Relax the abdomen, relax the shoulders, relax the jaw and the cheeks, relax the eyes. Instead of doing more breathing, let's chant Om together 3 times and see if you can be sensitive to the vibration created by chanting Om. And then just for a few minutes, give yourself permission to rest from all the thinking, all the planning, measuring, judging. Let yourself be free to rest in the present moment using whatever object of meditation you're familiar with. Inhale. Chant with me Loka Samasta mantra, if you know it, 3 times. And we can each feel that we're sending peaceful, healing energy outward through the heart. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May the light of truth dispel all ignorance. Victory to that light. Jai Sri Satguru Maharaj Ki Jai. Okay, thank you all for coming. Thanks for your contribution to the group energy.